Eep. Ah. Okay. There we go. Hi guys. We're back again, and we're gonna be reading more recipes of life from Jay Jaggerson and Matt Goodwin. So last time I goosed a little, still trying to figure some of this out, and I realized I didn't hold the book up far enough for you to see the Japanese translation. So I'm going to, yeah, it's down. Okay. I'm going to reread that and then show you the Japanese proverb. So it says, there is nothing more expensive than free. Free bar poker is no exception. Attributed to an old Japanese proverb, it means that when you accept something for free, you might be asking to do something or pay for something else in return, so that you might end up having to spend more than what you thought you had gained. Now, it is right there. I cannot pronounce it because I don't speak Japanese, but there's that. So, hopefully you guys saw that. And I thought it might be helpful also if I reread the primer. So we can maybe get these terms down. Alright, so cards. The cards go from ace to king, J, jack, Q, queen, K, king, A, ace, K, a pair of kings, face cards, J, jack, queen, king. And this is the different terms used in poker. So then it goes to poker terms. Antes. An ante is a small set amount which all players must contribute before any cards are dealt. Blinds, similar to an ante, but not everyone has to contribute. There are two blinds, the small and the big. The small blind is placed by the player directly to the left of the dealer button, with the big blind being to the left of the small. Blinds are typically set for a cash game of 1 or 2. For a tournament, the blinds typically start at 1 or 2 again, but after a set amount of time they increase. The time is determined by the type of tournament. Blinds can increase anywhere from 15 minutes to every 2 hours. The board, the table, check, no bet made, bet on the hand you have, burn. Take a card off the deck and put it in a discard pile without anyone seeing it. All in, when a player bets their entire stack of chips on their current hand. Big Slick is a suit AK such as the AK of hearts. Muck or mucking, this is just another term for folding. Rake, the percentage of the pot that the casino takes each hand. Bad bet, when you have a very good hand but you still beat by a better hand. Family pot, when everyone at the table is in the pot. No one folds. This is fewer hands than you would think. And I've never played poker, so I would not know. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Texas Hold'em terms. Hold cards. The cards the player is dealt. The 4 card terms describe the shared cards in the hand. Flop, the first 3 cards played on the board. The turn, the 4th card on the board. The river, also known as Fifth Street, is the last card to be dealt on the board. The next section describes the flow or play for the hand. Texas Hold'em, the play of the hand. The sequence of the game flows like this. Blinds are put in, the dealer deals the 2 hold cards to every player. These are your hold cards and are only for you to use /C. You will share the rest of the cards with everyone. Your goal is to make the best hand you can using 5 of the 7 cards. After the whole cards are dealt, you can check, bet, or call according to the whole cards. Once everyone has had a chance to check, bet, call, or fold, the dealer will burn the top card of the deck and deal the flop. Players have another opportunity to check, bet, call, or fold before the dealer will burn the top card again and deal the turn. This sequence is followed one last time for the river card, also known as Fifth Street. After the final round of check, bet, call, or fold, the hand is over. The last word term we'll describe is known as the tilt, or being on tilt. Tilt, just like it implies, is when the player loses their mind and starts playing with their emotions. It doesn't usually end well. Okay, now we're back to the book. Alright, just checking some stuff. Okay. Sorry, the only way I can see the chat room is to flip my phone over. So, sorry about that. Alright. So, here we go. Big Slick always carries a crisp $100 bill along with other cash in his money clip, never a wallet. He carries cash, his driver's license, and one credit card that he uses only when cash is not an option. He carries a $100 bill in his money clip since he was in college. Big Slick told me that over time the only thing that has changed is the amount of money he carries and the money clip he uses. His current one is from the Kentucky Derby. He told me that a $100 bill is important to have because you never know when there would be an emergency, if a friend needed help, or if a poker game materialized. When Mitchell Lewis's book Liar's Poker was published, it brought a new meaning to that $100 bill for Big Slick. In his book, Lewis described that New York stockbrokers would pay Liar's Poker for $100 bills, no tears. I saw this in action the first time when Big Slick calmly told a jerk named Anthony that he would cut high card for $100 no tears. We played in the same circles as Anthony, but wouldn't call him a friend. Slick wanted to play Liar's Poker with Anthony after Anthony went on a rant after a bad bet, and the other player was, well, less outspoken than Slick. Anthony went on about being a big-time gambler he was. What a big-time gambler he was. And Slick had heard enough. Rather than tell him to shut up, he put him to the test. Big Slick hated when someone was being made fun of or picked on. He loved telling jokes and could tease his friends with the best of them. However, someone being picked on was not tolerated. When Slick reached into his pocket and pulled out that $100 bill, Anthony muttered something and just walked off. Slick put the Benjamin back in his money clip and continued to play cards like nothing happened. Big Slick is like that, stoic, calm, yet has an air of no nonsense about him. Several witnesses said later that they had never seen Anthony speechless until that challenge. I have seen Slick pull out that $100 bill a few times. It's never in a boastful or bullying way, and you can tell he's serious about it. Slick uses it to test and see if someone is serious or if they are just being a blowhard. Most people back off, but I've seen a few of them take Slick up on the challenge. He has only lost once. He congratulated the guy and shook his hand. The other times he won. He was a generous winner. He never gave them the money back, but he was always generous. Anyone who thought Slick didn't understand or was new to gambling because he was learning Hold'em at a bar tournament was sorely mistaken. He grew up gambling. It started when he was 7 and his mom was going to have another baby boy. Slick wanted to establish the over/under on the birth date of his new brother and take bets from the family, but his mom wouldn't let them. Okay, Slick may have been kidding, maybe, but he knew every gambling game ever invented. He didn't play most of them, but knew how they worked and who would benefit from the game. He was quick to point out that the casinos were paying employees and had huge overhead to pay and needed to turn a profit. They were not able to do that by losing money. Common sense, but not to most people, as evident by the retirees sitting at the slot praying for the big payday that usually never came. Big Slick loved poker from a young age and played in a lot of family games. He would also play with adults from around the neighborhood. It was the typical nickel, dime, quarter, three raise limit poker that has been played around kitchen tables for decades. From these games, he had his own money, or a poker stack, as it's called. He fed it regularly and had enough to play when he wanted. He was taught to be a good loser, but most importantly, a good and gracious winner. The biggest influence on this was a neighbor who was a firefighter. The firefighter often invited Slick to poker games at the firehouse when he was a teenager. These games taught him how to play the correct way. For example, no crying about a bad bet, which is the anti-Anthony way. Don't get up from the table early if you are winning money ever. If you know the game always lasts until midnight and you had to leave at 10, then don't play. These are lessons that Slick carried through his entire life, and it served him well, and that is another reason we would get invited to a lot of poker games. We would both be good guests, and we understood the unwritten rules to how to act and play the game correctly. We didn't know all the rules of the Hold'em tournaments, however, but we were well acquainted with the universal rules that applied to every game from double solitaire to slapjack or Texas Hold'em. The main one being don't play if you can't handle losing. Slick never cared for poker games that had a lot of wild cards, and most of that came from playing with the firefighters at the neighborhood and firehouse games. It was the dealer's choice. You would call 5-card draw with jacks or better to win. 7 stud, 5-card stud. The same game that Wild Bill Hickok and Wyatt Eapen played in Deadwood, SD, over 150 years ago. Even in college, if someone would want to play baseball poker, Big Slick would ante and then sit out the hand. He hated a natural flush, losing to a full house. Even if he wasn't playing, Slick would say, "You may as well flip a coin for money. That really isn't playing poker." He didn't like jokers in the deck either, but he would tolerate it. In the end, poker was fair and always his favorite form of gambling. Slick didn't talk much about his poker experience because it really didn't matter when learning how to play tournament Texas Hold'em games. He wasn't one to boast about how, when he did, playing poker in the past, as it was irrelevant to the present games we were playing. He did tell me once that the summer between his sophomore and junior year of college, he made enough money between poker and betting on horses that he paid for his entire junior year. Slick knows that it was part luck, part studying the game of poker, and part knowing a couple of jockeys at the horse track that, on occasion, would suggest that a particular horse might be a good bet. It only happened that one summer, and Slick never went back to that. Well, he became focused on a career and raising a family, and didn't talk about the good old days. He found discussing his past incredibly boring. The Texas Hold'em boom brought him back into his love of the game of poker. It was dealt differently, and there were lots of new things to learn, but it was still poker and a great new version of poker. The challenge and psychological of poker was as much fun to Slick as winning money. I grew up in the mountains where skiing, gambling, being outdoors was the norm. We had a pretty large family, all of whom grew up like this. Every year, Thanksgiving, Christmas, 4th of July, really any holiday was a family get-together. We ate well, and after dessert, coffee was made, beer was passed around to those who wanted it, and the coins would hit the table. No one ever played more than penny ante poker at home. We had cheap plastic chips, cheaper cards, and no felt. Just the tabletop. I wasn't allowed to play until I was well into my teens, and nobody showed me how. I would throw chips and try to find a pair or 3 of a kind, as that's pretty much all I knew about the game. We played 3-card low ball, 2 draws, 5 cards, and 7-card stud, and jacks or better. I lost a lot of my allowance and earnings at those games, but I had a great time. I really learned to play when I got in the service after losing 3 entire paychecks. I figured I should probably stop giving my money away. You know, when you sit down to play, they say find the sucker. I didn't know it, but I was the sucker, and was invited because I didn't know or care at the time why I was losing all the time. I started watching games instead of playing. I would sit back, watch the action, and see how different people did things. I observed my first tells at that time, though I didn't know what they were called. I bought a deck of cards and started laying out hands. 5-card draw, 7-card stud, 5-card stud, just to think about cards and hands. All of this preparation paid off my first game back at the table. I watched for signs of what the cards were, figured out what someone may have and actually was able to win. Just a bit more than I originally brought to the game. It was a surprise to most of the adults that I was able to hold my own. I got better from there. I learned spades, hearts, and cribbage. Cribbage could cost a pretty penny if you weren't good at it. At $50 a game and a buck a point. Double that if you were skunked. It was high stakes for me at the time. As I continued to get better, I found that it was more enjoyable to win rather than give my money away. After more than 5 years on a ship playing cards whenever we could, it had an effect on how well we all played. Although I was improving, I didn't get really serious about playing until I found Hold'em with Big Slick. Okay, pausing here for a moment. Okay. All right. Here we go. After the night we met and became friends, Big Slick and I were in contact with one another within a week. We were on a quest to find a place to play poker, to have fun and hone our skills. The first place that seemed logical to find a game was to travel up the hill, 45 minutes from Littleton to the gambling town of Blackhawk and Central City. We took Friday off work and Slick picked me up on the way out of town. We hit the Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru, ordered 2 large black coffees, and started up I-70. With great anticipation, we drove up the hill in search of a casino that had the right vibe to their poker room. Both of us had played a lot of poker. However, Texas Hold'em was a different game than the 7-stud high spade in the hole, 3-card gut, and the 5-card draw that we grew up playing. For better or worse, Hold'em had a broader appeal and attracted people that we were not brought up understanding, winning and losing with class. Even though the trip took 45 minutes, it seemed like we arrived in Blackhawk within minutes because we were peering at the incredible snow-capped mountains and chatting away about Hold'em the entire time. We covered betting strategies and wondered how many people would be playing a poker tournament on a Friday morning. I had checked out several casinos online and found a casino that had a daily $40 buy-in sunrise tournament that started at 10 a.m. Only a casino would consider a 10 a.m. start the sunrise game. We arrived in the casino parking lot about 15 minutes before the game started and had plenty of time to scope out the scene to see if we wanted to pluck down $40 and play in our first Texas Hold'em tournament. When we stepped inside, it was like we heard a choir with loud trumpets playing in the background. We thought we had found our Hold'em moniker with our first casino poker room. We didn't notice the horns of the guy collecting money and handing out the seat assignments. There was a scurry of activity with players playing their buy-ins and making their way to their seats for the sunrise tournament. Both of us noted that everyone seemed more serious than we thought they would be. It was like they were getting in line for a tax audit and not a poker game. Big Slick walked up to the front of the line, the host acting as if he was almighty gatekeeper between us and the tournament, looked up at him. You would think this was a flashback to 1978, and we were trying to get into Studio 54 on a Saturday night. Slick said, "This is our first time playing in this tournament. Can you please tell us what we need to do to get registered?" The host, which in this case was a very iconic title, was in no mood to explain anything. In his most arrogant, uppity tone, proceeded to tell us in a Cliff Notes version that what we needed to do to enter then was with a sneer on his face, warned us if we messed up any of the rules, we would have to sit out a round of hands before getting back into the game. He then pointed to a batch that looked like the penalty box at a hockey game. Big Slick said, really? Yes, really, I am not kidding. Mess up twice and you will forfeit your chips and be escorted out of the poker room. A quick glance between Big Slick and I confirmed that we were thinking the same thing. What a douche. Slick thanked the host for his precious time, and we walked out of the poker room and into the casino. I am not going to play in that tourney this morning, I said. Slick replied, no way. We agreed to watch how the game flowed. We didn't stay for long. The guardrails were so far from the tables you couldn't see anything. That was trespassing at the tables. Transpiring at the tables. The only thing we noticed was that the chips were so worn down you could barely tell what denominations were in use. It was a shot of reality and a big-time letdown. The choir still sang, but the trumpets were definitely out of tune. It didn't deter us, just gave us a dose of what Hold'em can look like, and we wanted better. We were hoping that at different casinos the feel would be different. We walked across the street and the next casino had a beautiful poker room that was more what we had envisioned. The host was very helpful, explained the rules, and gave us a color brochure on when the games were played. The buy-ins varied from $60 to $200, and all the games had additional buy-ins if you got knocked out of the game. We had the information that we needed and decided that we didn't want to play any cash games, but we were also not quite ready to play in the tournament. Slick said, let's go check out the craps table to see how they're feeling today. We watched for a couple of minutes and Slick shook his head. Dice are cold as ice. I convinced him to check out the slot machines with me. Slick said, well, nothing is working today. Maybe the slots will pay off. Slick put $20 into a machine, and before I could find a machine to play, he waved me over. He said, I think $80 will buy us a couple of bison burgers at the Capitol Grill. With that, we headed down the road with our colored brochure in hand and talked about our next trip to Black Hawk. In celebration of our trip to Black Hawk, the recipe we'd like to share is snow crab with garlic butter sauce. Most of the casinos will usually have Alaskan king crab available, but we found this recipe that we enjoy to share with you. Snow crab in garlic butter from all the recipe websites. Ingredients: 1 pound snow crab clusters thawed, a fourth cup butter, 1 clove garlic, 1.5 teaspoons dried parsley, an eighth of a teaspoon salt, a fourth teaspoon black pepper, fresh ground is best. Directions: cut a slit lengthwise into the shell of each piece of crab. Melt butter in a large skillet over medium heat. Cook garlic and butter until translucent. Stir in parsley, salt, and pepper. Heat until mix bubbles slightly. Add crab legs and coat with butter sauce. Simmer and mix until heated, about 5 to 6 minutes. Ping. Text from Slick. What? Oh, I think this is the next chapter. Haha. Whoops. Give me 1 second. Okay. Pink. All right. Oop. All right. Ping. Text from Slick. What do you have going on tonight? Depends. Free Texas Hold'em tournament at the Whiskey Exchange tonight, 7 p.m. Let's get dinner before. See you at 6. I pulled up to the Whiskey Exchange a bit before 6, and Slick was already in the parking lot. No matter how early I showed up, Slick always beat me there. We walked into the bar, and it was so typical of the kind of neighborhood bar's classic rock, sticky 60s style carpet that hadn't been professionally cleaned ever. I thought if I dropped something on the floor besides my keys or wallet, it stays there, even with the classic rock, dirty floors, and the air being choked with the fragrance of old whiskey and cheap perfume mixed with cigarettes. My heart was pounding with anticipation. Slick and I were ready to play in our first Texas Hold'em tournament, and that was all that mattered that night. There were 7 tables set up, however, there was just a handful of players then. 5 minutes before the start of the game, a crash of players entered the poker area and got their seat assignment. Just like church, the place was empty until 5 minutes before the service started. Then everyone came running in. It wasn't exactly a Star Wars bar scene, but there were some intergalactic-looking characters that scrambled in to play some cards. I was so focused on playing and surviving to the first break, I didn't have time to think about all the different walks of life that were sitting at the table. In fact, I had no idea how long we had been playing when it was time for the first 15-minute break. Slick and I were not at the same table, so we met outside at the start of the break to report our stats. We agreed that it was fun just to see how a tournament worked. Then the unmistakable smell of weed overtook us. Whoa! We went back to the tables after break, and the smell of weed was so strong it was hard to breathe. Neither of us do any type of drugs or marijuana, so it was really overwhelming. It was like sitting next to Snoop and his entourage for the next 20 minutes. The cards were passed around, and everyone at the table would take turns as a dealer, unlike bars we discovered later that had a designated dealer at each table. Big Slick had been dealing cards forever, so that was not an issue. I had a few issues getting started with this, and man, were those cards sticky. The biggest dealing challenge came when multiple players would go all in, and there were different pots that each player could win. If you were a good dealer, you would take control of the table immediately and sort out the pots. Look at the players and say, everyone good, and continue on. It was getting close to the second break when Slick and I got knocked out within a few minutes of one another, and we met in the parking lot for a post-tournament discussion. We agreed that it wasn't exactly what we were looking for, but it was a great learning experience and mostly fun. Sinus the weed smell, and we were both willing to play again. The $200 top prize was fine, but that wasn't the main goal. The main goal was learning the official rules, and most importantly, the unwritten rules of free bar tournament poker. The next Wednesday at 6 p.m., as I pulled up to the bar, I could see Slick's car and knew his record of always being there first was still intact. As we walked in, the waitress came bounding over to greet us, welcome back, and directed us to a well-worn fake leather booth. The waitress remembered us from the previous week because, well, being a single guy, I always tip very well, and Slick and I are both tall and easy to remember. In this case, it was probably the big tip that she remembered. Slick and I always split the check, no matter what. We don't concern ourselves with petty things, which is another reason we were instant friends. When we paid the bill, we always pay in cash and tip well for good service. We ate our overcooked cheeseburgers and extra salty fries as we discussed what we did right and wrong last time at the table. We agreed not to be concerned about making it past any break. The goal was to be a solid player. Then, just like clockwork, at 6:55, the place was packed with players grabbing seat assignments. Slick and I always found it interesting to see the range of people that would assemble and sit next to each other, eager to play Texas Hold'em. In a makeshift poker room in a cramped corner of a bar, in any other life situation, they would not talk to one another, and in some cases cross the street to avoid them. However, the love and challenge of Texas Hold'em brings people together. There were too many faces in the crowd and too much happening at other tables to focus on them. You needed to stick to your own table and take it all in. That way you could see more information from the players at your table. Looking for tells is a serious business. We met a grandma that was at least 85 years old, pleasant with soft eyes, and smiled at everyone that made eye contact with her. It was her habit to only have one drink the entire night, a vodka martini. Everyone would take their seats, and the minute the cards were in the air, she became a cutthroat player. No holds barred, win at any cost competitor. The charge was shocking the first time we saw the change was shocking the first time we saw it. She would go all in, and those soft eyes would change from soft and pleasant to a person possessed. She would look at you like you just insulted her family ancestry practically during a call. If someone mucked their hands, she would quietly throw her cards in and would never tell what cards she was holding. Never ever. I loved watching her play unless I was hands up with her. Then I was scared. Then there was the Mister I am too cool to be playing with you losers. He would wear a hoodie, sunglasses, and earbuds. It was comic relief to Slick and I. I was thinking, dude, you are in Littleton, Colorado, playing free poker at a bar on a Wednesday night. Even if you win the entire thing, you aren't that cool. Then there was Anthony. He wore gold chains around his neck, slicked back his hair, reeked of Axe body spray, and wore a sweatsuit. He was obviously a fan of Polly Walnuts. He snuffed out a cigarette before walking in, and he blew out smoke as he walked into the bar. Classy. He acted like he owned the place and walked around and glad-handed everyone. He knew everyone, and yet nobody liked him. They would smile at him and then immediately lose the smile when he walked away. I even saw an eye roll from a player we confirmed. His name was Anthony, and he was seated at Slick's table. I was sure he would have a story about this guy at the first break. After the first break, Big Slick did have a story. I was already out and watched Slick's table from afar. Later, he would fill me in on the details of the hand that I saw him lose to Anthony. The two of spades dropped, and Slick was out of the tournament. Anthony started whooping it up while Big Slick quietly got up from the table, looked Anthony right in the face with his piercing blue eyes, and with a weary smile said, "Nice hand." He took his time picking up his marker, a 1922 silver dollar, and said to nobody in particular, "Good luck, everyone," and walked straight out the front door. Saying "nice hand" after winning a lucky hand you did not belong in doesn't mean nice hand. It means that you won't always be that lucky, and I can't wait to break you the next time we play. Slick, as was his style, walked away from the table without a hint of frustration. At the time, we didn't know we were going to have a lot of history with this gold chain wearing, axe smelling imbecile. I followed Slick to the parking lot. He filled me in with the hand he just lost. I had ace slash king of diamonds in the hole, and I raised the bet. Anthony calls my raise, and everyone else around the table folds. Anthony and I watched the 8-7-2 of diamonds hit the table. There is my nut flush. Anthony arrogantly goes all in with his two pair. I snap called, and we both flipped over our hands. Anthony starts whining like a little kid that got his toy taken away from him. 4th Street was a jack of clubs, no harm, no help. Then, as you walked up, you saw the deuce of spades drop. I said, "Bad bet." Slick says, "It's poker. Things happen." Although I am looking forward putting him on tilt next time we play. When we first started going to free bar poker, we would nearly always order a cheeseburger and fries. Some were better than others, of course, but we found these two recipes to be a winning combination for a home game. Cheeseburger with homemade fries taken from multiple recipes. Cheeseburger ingredients: 1 pound ground beef, a half cup shredded cheddar cheese, 2 tablespoons prepared horseradish, a half teaspoon salt, a half teaspoon pepper, a half teaspoon ground garlic powder, a half teaspoon real bacon bits, 4 hamburger buns. Directions. Step 1, preheat the grill for high heat. Step 2, in a large bowl, mix together the ground beef, cheddar cheese, horseradish, salt, pepper, garlic powder, and bacon bits. Using your hand, shape the mixture into 4 hamburger patties. Step 3, lightly oil the grill grate. Place hamburger patties on the grill and cook for 5 minutes per side, or until done to your liking. Serve on buns. Oven baked garlic and Parmesan fries. Ingredients: 4 large unpeeled russet potatoes cut into a 1/4-inch strips. A 1/4 cup olive oil, 3 cloves garlic minced, a half teaspoon ground dried thyme, a 1/4 teaspoon seasoned salt, optional, a half cup grated Parmesan cheese divided, a 1/4 cup chopped fresh parsley, a 1/4 cup grated Parmesan cheese, a 1/4 teaspoon seasoned salt, optional. Directions. Step 1, preheat an oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit, 220 degrees Celsius. Step 2, place the potatoes in a mixing bowl and drizzle with olive oil. Season with garlic, thyme, and a 1/4 teaspoon seasoned salt. Toss until evenly coated. Lift the fries out of the bowl and spread onto a non-stick baking sheet in a single layer. Serve the remaining oil in a bowl. Step 3, bake in a preheated oven 30 minutes, flipping the fries halfway through baking. Return the fries to the bowl with olive oil sprinkled with a half cup Parmesan cheese and parsley. Toss to coat, then spread again onto the baking sheet. Return to the oven and bake until the Parmesan cheese melts. About 10 minutes. Sprinkle the fries with the remaining 1/4 cup Parmesan cheese and a 1/4 teaspoon seasoned salt to serve. That sounds yummy. I'm a big hamburger person, so that sounds really yummy. Okay. All right. I think I'm going to read one more chapter and then maybe call it a day. We'll see how it goes. All right. In the beginning of our first game at the Whiskey Exchange, Big Slick's start was better than mine. I had a couple of issues helping set up the tables. The poker tables were usually only toppers put onto the top of bar tables. Once the tables were set up and everyone was ready, the bar manager counted out the chips, enlisting those standing around to help with each table to make the task quicker and the game start on time. Wanting to help, I asked what I could do and was promptly enlisted to help count the cards at the table. This is the step where you ensure all the cards are in the deck. It's not done by counting, but by separating them by suit in order. Eager to help, I picked up a deck, looked at it closely, then asked, "Is this the right deck for this table?" Now, most bar poker places have the regulation plastic cards. Why? It lets you wash them off when they get soda, beer, barbecue sauce, or any number of other things you'll find in a bar. It's nice and it keeps them from sticking together. Not this place. This place had regular bicycle cards. You know, the $3 ones you have at a family dinner when the parents want to play penny ante poker. Paper, not plastic. Sounds like a grocery store. As you can imagine, paper cards soak up everything. Beer, soda, barbecue sauce, and you get the idea. I turned the cards over and found that the first card on top, I think it was a 3 of clubs, but I couldn't be sure since it was covered with barbecue sauce, or at least that is what I told myself it was. I went to see Big Slick, and he was busy working on some chip stacks, so I went to the bar for some club soda. I thought I would try to clean the cards. This was not a good idea at all. I got some napkins, or they could have been toilet paper. They were so thin. As I dipped the end of the napkin in the club soda and started working on the stain, much to the confused amazement of the onlookers, I worked on the card, but was only successful in smearing the stain around. Some came off, but most of it soaked into the card. Not wanting to admit defeat in front of the crowd that had suddenly formed around me, I tried again. Once again the stain just smeared even more than before. This time, however, I added more pressure because I was going to rub that stain out. The card started disintegrating, and as it came apart in my hand, it was stain 1, chief 0. I tried to salvage the deck, but alas, it was not to be. I ended up giving the bar $5 for a new deck of cards that night, much to the amusement of the regulars. I thought the host might upgrade the cards, but no, it was not in the cards. Instant eye-rolling laughter here. I did get to another table and counted out the cards, not trying to fix them, but wishing I had some gloves. That was not the last thing I did that night that amused the regulars. I didn't know that this place passed the deal around, so that was an unpleasant shock when the game started. I was at one table and Big Slick was at another, because we didn't want to play against each other at the first game. There were not a lot of professional dealers at this game. No matter who dealt the cards, went everywhere. Nearly every person at the table fancied themselves professional dealers and would throw cards. Some people were good enough, some people weren't, and the cards almost always ended up in the wrong position, face up or off the table completely. It was an interesting display of showmanship. I, of course, just knew I could throw cards like a pro because, hey, I did at Trevi's place and at family games. I did not consider that the tables at home games were about half the size of the one at the bar. When the deal came to me, I shuffled, then threw the first card right off the table. Heck, I almost made it to the table next to us. Some laughed, others just scowled at me, and with a red face I decided that I should enlist help from the players to be sure that didn't happen again. I decided then that I would be a dealer, and a good one at that, but that's a story for another time. The rest of the game went by quickly. Before we knew it, we were on first break, and as before, the smoke was thick. During the second break, I started asking around about the cards and why they were paper. Mostly no one knew, but everyone put up with it. It certainly gave me an appreciation for the plastic cards and how easy they were to clean. Not too many minutes later, Big Slick and I were both out and headed to our cars to discuss strategy for next week. Boink. Okay. All right, and this next one's rather short, so I guess I'll go ahead and I'll read that one too. After the first 2 times at the Whiskey Exchange, Big Slick and I got together to talk about how different bar poker was from our previous experience. After some practice, dealing hands, and talking about actions, we felt we were ready to tackle the next week. Slick showed up before I did and got a great seat at the poker table. We were in our seats and ready to play when cards were in the air. The first few hands were warm-ups, then we started playing our strategy. By the first break, Slick was chip lead at his table. I was okay being 4th out of the 9 at my table. We talked about what went well and what didn't. It turned out that I was being distracted by another player and didn't realize it. She was the chip leader at our table, and I think she may have been flirting with everyone as part of her strategy. Back at the table after break, people were getting low on chips and employing the go all in strategy. This strategy is when a player with a small stack will throw the Hail Mary pass and pray for good cards. Slick handled this like a boss, but at my table I lost part of my stack to this ploy. I started a pocket pair of 10s, so when another player shoved his stack in, I called. It ended up being 3 of us in the pot, the lady who called having a stack close to mine. We turned over our cards, and the short stack player had queens. The second player had a pair of nines against my pair of tens. The flop was a miss for all of us, being a 2, 6, and ace. The turn was a 10, giving me hope. Then there came the river, the famous river, the bane of your hand, or the saving grace, giving you that smile that says I won. He won with a queen came down. He got both of our chips, and I still got the rest of hers, and she was out of the game. Her chips were a small consolation, but a welcome addition to my stack. In the end, I was moved to another table and lost the rest of my chips, only making it to the last 2 tables. Although I was out relatively early, Big Slick was a playing machine that night. I watched him bluff his way to a large pot, giving him an even larger lead than he already had. Then he got Big Slick for his hole cards. Big Slick was nicknamed after the hand, an AK suited, and a very good hand to start with. The flop was 10, jack, and a queen, giving him a straight, proving he couldn't miss. He bet big and had another player call him. The last 2 cards were a 4 and an 8, though through it all he pushed chips in the middle, leaving the other player 2 choices. He could fold or push his stack all in. The player shoved his stack, and Slick set a record in how fast he called him. Slick straight won the hand. Slick played smart and did well that night, and ended up splitting the pot with the other final player that night. All these games and strategies was a good start for our bar poker careers, but could we make it with real money on the line? And I think that is going to be a good stopping spot for today. I hope you have all enjoyed, and I shall see you next time. Bye. I have no idea.
I've got